Good evening. Welcome to the Families edition of The Hammer Show. My name is He Ting Ru, and I'm a candidate for the Workers' Party in Sengkang GRC. Tonight, we have 4 panelists with us. On my left, we have Chua from Sengkang GRC. We've got Abdul Shariff from East Coast GRC. And on my right, we've got Nicole Seah from East Coast GRC. And we've got Ron Tan from Marine Parade GRC. It is often said that families are the bedrock of our nation. They should actually be a source of comfort and not actually a worry for us. I think Singaporeans actually need to be equipped with the right tools and support for families to be able to pursue our dreams. All of us here today are young parents, and I think between us we have 7 children, aged between 9 months and 8 years old. So we really are living right in the middle of being parents and parenting and all the worries and the joys and the frustrations and all the screaming that comes along with it. And I think everyone probably can tell by our eye bags and the white hairs on our heads, just how much of a joy our children are. Anyway, so coming back to the topic of families, I think it's quite obvious that the family trends in Singapore are changing. We're seeing more later marriages, divorces, remarriages. So I think we really have to have a really good hard think about how our policies, which were probably shaped during a time where things were a bit more stable, or there was a more traditional family structure, then these policies might have made sense then. But I think now they're probably a source of strain for some of the families that we're seeing. So I think for me, the most important thing is cost-benefit analysis should not really take precedence anymore. We really need to get to the heart of the matter, and by heart I really mean some of the softer areas around our families. And so I think this really has to make us think very hard about what we have to legislate and the policies that we actually come into force as an economy and as a society. So first off, we're going to have a speech from Dennis Tan, and he will be talking to us about the cost of living.
Dear Singaporeans, in the course of helping low-income families and residents in Hougang and Fengshan, I've often been concerned with how residents, especially the vulnerable among us, can afford the daily necessities in life. Some will point to inflation statistics to tell us that prices grew slowly. But if we look more closely at the data, 3 items that saw higher growth than the headline figure over 2014 to 2019 were education, food, and healthcare. Just last year, the Public Transport Council approved the biggest percentage jump in public transport fares since 1998. This came just as our public transport system is finally seeing its promise fulfilled, after billions of subsidies funded by us, the tax-paying Singaporeans. Minister Koh even hinted that commuters may need to pay even higher fares in future. How about the price of water, which did not change from 2000 to 2016? Within 2 years of telling Parliament that the price of water need not go up, the PAP went ahead and tell us that there's a pressing need to raise prices. Surely it was not to bring up the awareness of the importance of water. For the less fortunate among us Singaporeans, who spend a larger proportion of their income on essentials, the effects of all these increases only weigh them down further. Those of us in the sandwich generation, caring for parents and children, face the burden of the rising cost of living. The PAP would have you know that they have a grip on cost of living. Back in 2018, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong promised us that the authorities will do its part to alleviate people's cost of living concerns. But he also said, and I quote, "Each of us has a responsibility to look after our own wallets, save water, save electricity, and at the same time shop around for the best prices and be a smart consumer," unquote. This might sound like prudent advice, but how easy it is for Singaporeans to shop around. Costs are increasing consistently across the board, and in so many essential aspects of our everyday lives. On top of that, we already know that the goods and services tax is going to be increased from 7 to 9% after 2020. This will surely have an exponential effect on increasing the cost of living in the coming years. We in the Workers' Party know your pain and is committed to control the cost of living for Singaporeans. We said no to raising the GST without showing sufficient justification. We questioned the government on why it chose to raise water prices so dramatically after not doing so for so long. We are advocating for free public transport for seniors and persons with disabilities. We hope you can vote for the Workers' Party and tell the PAP that they cannot expect Singaporeans to be signing blank checks to them. Make your vote count. Vote for the Workers' Party. Thank you.
So we've just heard from Dennis, who has discussed with us about some of the issues relating to cost of living, and I think this is a very pain point for a lot of families nowadays. In fact, I think most of the complaints, we hear from people either trying to start families or wanting to start families or even young families is children are really expensive. And, normally when we hear, oh, are you going to have another one? The most common answer is, oh, I can't afford it. And, I think I remember the other day, Ron and I were just talking about the cost of baby formula, milk powder.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when my daughter's like me, she's got a very good appetite. She goes through a tin of milk as fast as 2 weeks. And the cost of milk powder is ridiculous nowadays. Like I remember when she was born, a tin of milk formula is about $60+. And after that, I asked my brother, hey, how's things over there in Australia? And he told me, oh, I can try and find it for you, and maybe I can send it back to you. So I was wondering, wouldn't that be too expensive to do the shipping and everything to come back? And actually, it's about half price in Australia for exactly the same thing as well. So that's the situation now, because I'm on young family forums on the internet as well. A lot of parents are complaining about the high cost of milk formulas for them. They're trying to, ensure that their children are well fed, and especially for first-time parents, it is very stressful for them to find the right formula, be it because their babies are picky eaters or because they have certain allergies. Yeah. They don't have a choice to, go down the preferred option of breast milk as what the government is trying to promote nowadays. So that's one very expensive cost, and then you add in your diaper costs, your medication costs, your toys, your clothes, and all these things. It is getting very expensive for young families to even think about starting families.
And if I can add on to Ron's point over there, I think it's not just the direct cost of raising a child in Singapore. It is also the indirect cost of living and all these that adds up to the financial burden of families. So I find it a bit self-contradictory sometimes when I look at the PAP manifesto where it says that we will assist you with the cost of living, but at the same time you are raising GST from 7% to 9%. Are we really having to raise GST, or do we have to perhaps think about alternative revenue sources that can be explored? I mean, if you think about the burden that families face right now, just the other day I saw an advertisement by one of the local banks which states that you need $1.3 million if you want to retire in 20 years. Sure, that depends on what assumptions are underlying that. But in another advertisement by the same bank, you see another ad saying that 2 in 3 Singaporeans do not even have enough savings to last them for 6 months. Now, if you can't even last 6 months, how do you even consider retirement? And if you look back at the financial burden of families, if the first thing that comes to our mind is it's expensive to raise a child, then how do we even address the total fertility rate issue where it's now at a record low of 1.14? And I think we need to rethink the underlying assumptions behind that and really consider what the longer-term socio-economic costs would be rather than just think about the short-term issues of the cost of child raising.
Okay, thank you, Kheng. Thank you, Ron. And now we're going to turn to the next video, which is by Faisal Manap. He will be talking to us about the role of families and our approach. Thank you.
Keluarga adalah nadi atau tunggak sesebuah negara. Sesebuah negara akan kukuh jika institusi keluarganya utuh. Usaha-usaha pembangunan sebuah keluarga yang utuh perlu dilakukan secara holistik. Antara aspek utama adalah bagaimana seseorang ketua keluarga menjalankan tanggungjawab dan memainkan peranannya. Dan salah satu faktor yang mempengaruhi secara langsung aspek ini adalah keseimbangan kehidupan berkeluarga dan bekerja, work-life balance. Kajian telah menunjukkan bahawa keseimbangan kehidupan berkeluarga dan bekerja adalah penting dalam pembentukan keutuhan keluarga. Mencapai keseimbangan ini adalah sesuatu yang mencabar dalam kehidupan masyarakat Singapura. Di Singapura pada hari ini, masih ramai ketua-ketua keluarga yang mengeluh tentang kos sara kehidupan dan tidak mempunyai waktu berkeluarga yang berkualiti disebabkan situasi kehidupan yang mencabar dan menekan. Salah satu falsafah Parti Pekerja adalah membentuk sebuah kehidupan yang bermaruah di mana masyarakat atau rakyat Singapura dapat menjalani kehidupan dalam keadaan yang selesa dan seimbang. Parti Pekerja amat menitik beratkan faktor keseimbangan kehidupan berkeluarga dan bekerja. Anggota-anggota Parlimen Parti Pekerja sering dan telah banyak kali mengetengah dan menyuarakan pertanyaan dan cadangan yang berkaitan usaha untuk memperbaiki kehidupan berkeluarga, terutama bagi keluarga-keluarga yang memerlukan. Saya sendiri telah menyuarakan beberapa cadangan seperti diadakan cuti bapa, semak semula kelaikan pendapatan bagi permohonan rumah sewa awam HDB, bantuan yang lebih baik kepada golongan ibu tunggal, semak semula skim COE bagi motosikal, diadakan sebuah sistem pemantauan untuk menilai keberkesanan skim-skim bantuan yang ada dan banyak lagi perkara yang lain. Usaha untuk memperbaiki keadaan ini adalah usaha berterusan. InsyaAllah, Parti Pekerja akan teruskan usaha kami ini selagi kami diberi amanah oleh masyarakat Singapura untuk menjadi suara anda di Parlimen pada pilihan raya umum kali ini. Undi anda memberi kesan kepada kehidupan dan masa depan keluarga anda. Manfaatkan undi anda, undilah Parti Pekerja.
So Faisal has just spoken to us about looking at families as a more holistic, in a more holistic way, and also about some of the ways that we can achieve this. Shariff, I know you have some views to share on this, and so maybe you'd like to just ask.
So Faisal Manap's speech touched on work-life balance. Singaporeans, according to the Ministry of Manpower, works about 44.7 hours a week on average in 2019. Add commuting time to that, I think there's only a handful of hours left for the parents to interact with children. The situation is even difficult if you consider dual income household where both spouses are working, and let alone single parent, right? And for those from lower income household, I used to work in low wage work, and the way we make ends meet is by doing overtime work or taking on another job. So it is quite common for a spouse, a parent to be absent, and usually it's the father. Now, Faisal proposed a number of initiatives, one of which is paternity leave. In addition to that, I would also like to propose that the work from home arrangement, which we saw during the COVID-19 period, be extended to beyond the COVID-19 period. One of the complaints that against work from home is that it affected productivity. My view is that it might be the case because there was only a very limited grace period to implement a work from home arrangement. So if there is sufficient preparation, I'm quite sure that it will turn out even better. It's not just businesses that should go digital. I think households can also go digital. And with this, it will support parents who want to have more family time. It will support work-life balance. So on a more micro level, on a more personal note, I thought that we should also have a rethink of gender roles within the household. Both spouses can, chip in when it comes to caregiving and housework. In my case, when I do washing of dishes, I don't tell people that I'm helping my wife to wash dishes. I say that it is my job to do that. Yeah, that's how we do share household.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Maybe I need to remember next time, when I talk to my husband, right? It's not, please, can you help me with the dishes? Do your job.
So, it's so interesting that, you talk about that, right? Because the mental load, I think we spoke about this in the women's show as well. The mental load is something that a lot of women have to deal with, especially when there's a bit more of an unequal distribution of responsibilities and chores within the household. And, for middle income to higher income individuals, it does already take more of a psychological toll. So I can imagine how much worse it would be for someone who's really struggling to make ends meet, right? But I also like to go back to your point about, the whole idea of working from home and even home-based learning during circuit breaker. I think these are terms and these are arrangements that we really took for granted. That, if we had the laptops and the devices at home, and if we had all the time, and if our company was flexible enough, then we had that leeway and we had the latitude to really give our all to our kids even during this time. But for a lot of families from lower income households, they really don't have that luxury at all. And you will find that it's really due to a couple of things, right? Number one, their work is not scalable, meaning that if they don't work, they don't get paid. And the second thing is that they probably have shift work as well, so they might be in essential services, and their working hours are very fixed. So it's difficult for them to tend to their kids. So I would also like to point to the fact that when an individual doesn't earn as much in life, the Singapore narrative is a bit troubling, because we will always say that it's due to the individual not working or striving hard enough. But I think we also need to be mindful of the systemic inequality that prevails and that is really quite present in society right now. I remember doing food distribution exercises in East Coast GRC, and we would do this on a monthly basis. And you would have all of these people, and who receive food supplies from us. And sometimes when we try and offer them these food supplies, they would say, "Oh no, we want to be self-sufficient. We are not going to take these handouts from you, and you can give them to someone who needs them more." So I think that whole narrative about people not, individuals who are lower income, freeloading or sponging off the system is really something that we really need to correct, because that is absolutely not the case at all.
Yeah, I mean, I find one of the things that that they really came up very strongly when we were doing food distribution is the community spirit between households, how they look out for each other. I don't really get that sense sometimes, in other parts of society, and I think we actually really need to learn from them, and this is something that will really benefit all of us as a whole if we actually adopt some of those mindsets and mentality as well. And now we're going to move back to our next speech. This is by Nat, and he will be talking to us about some of the difficulties that young parents will face.
My friends, I am at that age where the people around me are having children. It is both a joyous occasion and an impending sense of responsibility. I'm happy to say that my wife and I are expecting our first child very soon. We have thought over the caring of our newborn, with the belief that caring for our newborn is a joint responsibility. That means that my wife will be taking her maternity leave, while I will be taking my paternity leave. But do you know that in 2018, 65% of fathers did not take their paternity leave? Could it be society's expectations of women being the primary caregiver while men simply play a supporting role? There remains a stigma when fathers wish to play a more active role in raising children. Many families are lucky in getting support from their extended family. However, as a society, we are moving away from the extended family support structure, and this support may not be available to all families. To support our fathers, we can change our family leave policy to be gender neutral. That can begin by enhancing the existing shared parental leave scheme. This scheme combines maternity and paternity leave into a single shared parental leave entitlement and empowers parents to decide how to care for their newborn. Furthermore, the Workers' Party also proposes increasing the total parental leave entitlement from 18 weeks to 24 weeks, giving all parents an additional 6 weeks to care for their infant children. Throughout my grassroots work, I have observed that families are changing. There are more single-parent households, more families who would like to but are unable to have children, and more marriages between Singaporeans and foreigners. Policies must keep up with the changing times. We propose to equalize childcare subsidies for all women regardless of status. We believe that fertility support can be enhanced for those who need it. For the sake of the children who deserve care from both parents, naturalization of foreign spouses on LTVP Plus should be fast-tracked. My fellow Singaporeans, we can live in a society where parents can feel free to care for their child. We can live in a society where policy changes to a changing time. Let us bring our proposals to Parliament. Make your vote count. Vote for the Workers' Party.
So we've just heard a speech from Nat where he talks to us about the importance of having policies that actually support more gender-balanced families. Louis, as a young father of a 9-month-old boy yourself, I'm sure all this is very pertinent to you. I'm just wondering whether you can share some of your thoughts on these.
I would agree with that there, and I'm sure Ron would agree with me that I'm very proud to say that I'm a diaper-changing dad. So over the last couple of months, I'm glad that I've been able to learn to feed him, change his diapers, and really just be a father to him. And I think it's time that we recognize that there should be an equal sharing of responsibilities when it comes to bringing up a child, and fathers too have an important role to play in the education of their child. So it's one where, I think this is a point mentioned by Nicole and Shariff earlier, that we really ought to think about whether or not there can be greater flexibility when it comes to work from home practices, when it comes to allowing families that additional flexibility to tend to their child. And I think it's something which, again, the narrative has been that, if we give employees more childcare leave, more parental leave, it actually harms productivity. It's bad for the company, it's bad for the economy. But I would say that it's really the opposite, where if you do provide the additional flexibility, the additional time off for parents to focus on their child when they need to, so that they can focus on their work, I think it's something which would even raise productivity. And this is something which I believe that a lot of companies here in Singapore have also recognized. And there are many progressive companies that have even 26 weeks of parental leave for both parents.
Yeah, I'm quite pleased to hear we have some champion pooper-scoopers amongst us. Anyway, so I think, it's obviously, Kheng Wee shared with us, some of his experiences as a father, and, how he feels that he could be better supported for that. But I think it's actually also very important for us to remember that we also must remember that, not every couple who doesn't have children actually has chosen to be that way. Of course, there are some who have chosen to not have children, but from conversations and from some of the data, it does actually show that there are many Singaporean couples who are actually struggling and to have children, and they're struggling within the system to find the right support. I'm just wondering whether, Nicole, you had anything to share about this?
Yeah, so actually, Ru, is a matter that's very personal to me and very close to my heart. Also because I had quite a bit of difficulty conceiving, and I managed to conceive my daughter via IVF. So I'd just like to share some of the challenges that I noticed during this entire journey. We will see that there have been statistics to show that about 1 in 10 of Singaporean couples will be diagnosed as having fertility issues. So it's actually more commonplace than we think. But I think at the end of the day, because right after the point where you get married, everyone's asking you, when are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? And I think for a lot of, as a result of that, there's then a stigma on the couples where they just don't know how to seek help. help, or they don't know if they're even doing things the right way. So I would say that it really boils down to a lack of basic education on things like how to conceive and all. But for those who actually have identified that there is an issue, then it's an entire ballgame altogether, and there are so many challenges involved in the mix, right? One of them would be financial. So obviously there is a huge financial cost that is involved in the entire process, and also the lack of knowledge again. So there are so many different procedures out there, and they are all for different kinds of ailments and illnesses. But how do we identify and how do we put that public knowledge into the hands of people to make the best decision on what is the right choice for their body and what will result in the best outcome and the best result. The other thing is the amount of time that's invested in the entire process. Gynecology is a very personal kind of medical, it's a very personal thing. So you have to make sure that the gynecologist is someone who understands you and who also specializes in your type of issues, which might not be a luxury that people who go through the public hospital route get to experience. So, and because of that, the amount of time, the amount of money that you spend just seeking out the right person could really be a huge drain on resources. Lastly, because of the financial and the time implications, you then need a very understanding employer. I think the last thing we want is for employers to discriminate on the basis of the fact that you're trying to have a kid. So we also need to have a more flexible and more understanding workplace environment, and that really goes back to Louis's point about, what more can we do in that regard. Yeah.
Thanks, Nicole. And now we're going to go back to the speech again. This time we've got Chen, who'll be talking to us about our care systems.
大家好，我是陈真真，我是工人党榜儿溪选区的候选人。我在雾洛水池榜儿区与为居民服务，接触了许多不同的家庭，这使我熟知大家的日常担忧。在新加坡，大家都说能死不能病。这是因为医药费一直不断的往上涨，虽然终身健保让病患能应付大部分的住院费，但是他们每年最多只能保到10万块，病人也需要共同承担10%的费用和保险规定的自付额或免付额。大家想，如果一个人需要长期住院，需要住在加护病房，还有一些昂贵的治疗和药物，那一年10万块足够他们付医药费吗？再加上有些昂贵的药物治疗是不包括在终身健保里的，这些钱都需要病人自己付，这增加了病人和家属的负担。工人党认为，调低自付额和共同承担额，每年10万块的顶额也应该不设限，这才能确保人民能够负担得起医药费。在新冠状病毒疫情下，有很多家庭主妇必须时刻照顾在家中工作的家人，不少母亲要同时工作还要照顾孩子，这都是重要的劳动，不过却是无偿的劳动。这也是新冠状病毒疫情爆发前就存在的现实，许多国人只是在这期间才亲眼看到。工人党认为，任何劳动都要得到合理的支持和协助，在家负责照顾家人的家庭主妇也不例外。工人党会一直与大家同行，为无声者发声，请投工人党一票，让您的一票成就未来。谢谢。
So we've just heard from Chen, and she's talking about the various care systems. I think, we've heard this word holistic a lot, but, once again, I think we really need to look at the care systems as a whole rather than just separate healthcare, social care, infant care, because there's so many overlaps between these. And if we really start to compartmentalize all of them, my fear is that really things will start to slip through the cracks and we don't actually maximize efficiency. I'm just wondering whether, Shariff, this is something that you've studied before, and I'm wondering whether you can share some of your thoughts on how we can tackle some of the issues.
Yes. So I had the opportunity to conduct focus group with economically inactive women. Actually, they are far from being inactive. Many of them actually sandwich between caregiving for old age dependents and caregiving for young dependents. So when I asked them whether if they have a choice, will they work? And many of them say yes, they will work. And this has largely to do with cost and, I mean, you have two dependents to take care of, right? So one of the things that are preventing them from working is that although we have, companies offered work-life grant to implement flexible work arrangement, most of the respondents were saying that they have difficulty finding employers who can really offer that kind of flexible work arrangement. So what I observed over time was that many of them take up jobs like food delivery work and also home-based business. Now these are okay, such jobs give them flexibility and all that, but it doesn't put them on a career pathway. And there's the issue of CPF contribution, and also the question of whether there will be retirement advocacy in the longer run. What I feel is that there should be greater recognition of the contribution of informal caregivers, and like workers in formal employment, there should be a recognition that they too contribute to the nation. Yeah.
Like speaking about, recognizing unpaid labor, a lot of family members are sacrificing their time to help look after the family. So I'm very grateful to my mother and my mother-in-law for helping look after my young kid. Because if not, how are we able to find childcare facilities for them? And as you know, and as a lot of young families know, they are facing challenges to find available slots in the childcare facilities within their neighborhood to put their child there while they go to work. And on top of that, they have to get out of their own estate to travel further down so that they are able to find childcare facility for their child. And that's quite disheartening because they're trying to do the best for their own family as well. But unfortunately, we do not have such facilities or enough infrastructure to provide such facilities for families. And that's just looking after the young. What about the old as well? People are aging, Singaporeans are aging. We need to have these facilities in place to ensure that we have the best facilities and adequate facilities for all Singaporeans.
Next, we have a speech by Terence Tan, and he will be talking to us about the education system.
As parents, we all have hopes and ambitions for our children. I have two young children, aged 3 and 2. They love going to preschool and learning through play. They get upset when the weekend swings around. Many of my fellow candidates have children too. Our common hope is that they go to schools that nurture their curiosity, their creativity, that instill in them a lifetime desire to always keep learning and growing. After all, the next generation will need to navigate an increasingly disruptive world. What better way to help them than to equip them to become the disruptors in a disruptive age and create jobs and a vibrant economy for themselves and others. But there's still so many horror stories on education that we hear during our outreaches to residents. At the primary and secondary school levels, we hear that the number of assessments and examinations are overwhelming. If our children do not do well in high-stakes assessments, they are branded inferior and sent to a lesser stream. Does this serve to stretch our children's potentials, or to depress them, or even to stifle their potential love for learning? My fellow Singaporeans, one Singapore child ending up discouraged is one child too many. We have heard that various educational reforms are underway. That feedback has been taken by the Ministry of Education, that the objectives of maximizing every Singaporean child's potential and to nurture them in a lifelong desire to learn were not being wholly met. The Workers' Party intends to see that these reforms are met. If elected, I will work with my colleagues to follow up on the MOE's reforms and play a part in ensuring that our younger Singaporeans will truly benefit from what the ministry has already promised: the development of a lifelong joy of learning and more pathways for Singaporeans to succeed. Our education system must also remain accessible to all, particularly to those from disadvantaged backgrounds. I count myself lucky to have enjoyed the benefits of a good education and good schools in the 70s and the 80s. My fellow classmates came from all walks of life. Many in my cohort went on to achieve fulfillment in many fields as a direct benefit of being given a good education. But we cannot pretend that the playing field is level. The Workers' Party believes in active intervention to seek out ways to level the playing field, whether be it through smaller class sizes or ensuring equitable funding to all schools. No young Singaporean must be deprived of a holistic education. The Workers' Party believes in supporting Singaporeans to achieve their full potential and seeing them blossom into world beaters. Should you agree, I ask that you vote for the Workers' Party. Make your vote count.
So we've just heard from Terence about the education system, and this is a topic that's very close to our hearts. For me personally, I actually believe that, I think there's a very strong need for access schemes to be put in place to give greater accessibility for children from lower income and disadvantaged families to get to universities and also even to the professions. I think a lot of things that many of us maybe take for granted is that we know, we are familiar, or at least we know people who have gone through the similar application process and who know what to do in order to get there. So I think, for example, in the UK, a lot of universities, especially the top universities, they place a lot of emphasis and a lot of importance on these access schemes. When they have very targeted programs, they actually pair up, for example, current students with identified mentees. So it's a mentorship kind of program. When they actually do bring these students from very disadvantaged backgrounds, but have very good potential and they're very bright and could actually benefit from a bit of mentorship from current students to helping them understand what the applications process is, help them understand, even things like, when going for an interview, how do you, interview preparation, how do you dress? I mean, something as basic as that many of us take for granted. I think this is something that we can do in Singapore, and not just for universities, as I said, but also for professions as well. Because job interviews are scary, especially when you're coming out of university, and I don't think many of us could have done it without the support and the preparation given by people around us. So I think one other thing that I would really like to say about this is, we really have to challenge the narrative that widening access to education, to opportunities will actually result in a more competitive or a more difficult, a more challenging competitive playing field for everybody. I think actually we are looking at a situation where these guys, when we actually get more people, you actually increase the talent pool. And I think it's actually very important that we focus on this.
Personally, I'm someone who is in a position of making hiring decisions. So what you've rightfully pointed out is that we need to do more to protect our Singaporean workforce, especially the ones who are entering the industry right now at such an uncertain time. One disturbing trend that I've noticed is that I think there is a sense of that there is a lack of youth employability readiness, where, like what you shared, they might show up to an interview dressed in like denim cutoffs, or they're not prepared, or they don't even know, what the company does or what job they're applying for. I think sometimes it's too easy for us to chalk that up to that being the fault of a generation, to say that, are they so spoiled and are they so sheltered that they did not even bother to prepare and they don't have the fire in their belly anymore compared to the older generation. But I think that's also a gross generalization, right? I think on our end, we need to consider what kind of systemic measures can we put in place to improve that and make sure that our youth are ready. And also we see that, it's not just so much about technical competence anymore. You could take a course. There are so many courses out there, right? There is Skills Future, you can apply for so many of these things. And then they will give you a certificate that then allows you to, get that foot through the door if you're applying for a mid-career switch. But we also know that such courses are very theoretical in nature and they just scratch the surface. So if you really want to be able to adapt, you really want to be able to assimilate into the global workforce especially, then we need to be able to develop our soft skills. We need to be able to be more resilient. We need to be more adaptable. So just to give you an example, when I'm in the marketing industry, we do see that the trends and the kind of technology that we use shifts on a 6-month to 1-year cycle. So if you don't learn fast enough, then you're just going to get left behind. Lastly, I think in terms of tertiary institutions, and you've shared some about that already, we do also need to make sure that we shift away from being very academia focused to seeing what more we can do to create that hands-on experience for our younger Singaporeans.
Yeah, just to add on to that, right, on the issue of focusing on academia, and I personally I feel that class sizes should be reduced. Now, I understand that if you reduce class sizes, then there will be the issue of cost. You know, you need to recruit more teachers, you need to have the facilities, and maybe it might even result in schools having to restructure their, you know, their environment. So one of the ways to deal with this is to, you know, I mean, when you have smaller class sizes, you may not need that many enrichment programs or remedial classes, you know, because the teacher will be in a position to provide personalized attention and deal with the students' issues as, you know, the program is, lessons are being conducted. And, you know, in Workers' Party's manifesto, there's also the 10-year True Train program, which will help to shift the focus away from exams to experiential learning or, you know, knowledge-based learning, which, you know, will better contribute to the development of talents and skills.
So actually at this point, yeah, I think we really need to think about the underlying assumption as to what exactly is our education system going to do, whether or not it can actually serve its purpose, whether or not it can equip our children with the right skills and knowledge to prepare themselves for the industry of the future. So to me, it doesn't matter whether or not we score the highest in the PISA scores in math and science, whether or not our primary school kids can actually memorize certain facts about photosynthesis. It's really about whether or not, you know, our education system provides us with the right skill sets, the right, provides us with the ability to think critically, and with the ability to learn, relearn, and unlearn some of these knowledge, because as Nicole mentioned, we live in a rapidly evolving world where technological disruption happens so quickly. So it is all the more important for us to impart not just knowledge, but really skills of the future to equip our children to be better able to adapt.
Yeah, I think to add to that, with the ever-changing society that we're facing now, we must not neglect the education of family values, because a lot of families are focusing on grades, like you mentioned, study hard, get the best grade, get the best job. But by doing that, you do neglect a bit of yourself in your position in the whole family nucleus. So like we've shared earlier, families are spending more time trying to earn enough income because of the high cost of living for their families. They don't spend enough time with their children. And this is just one part of it. They're not spending time with the elderlies as well. We're slowly eroding our culture, even more so towards our Singapore identity even. Like when I come back from overseas that time, I find that, hey, how come Singaporeans are like, not as friendly perhaps as in the past? People are closing their doors at HDB estates. Well, in the past, I remember when I visited my relatives, to leave the door open, everyone would be saying hi to each other. I feel that that's something that we need to look into. Respect your elders, respect your culture, pass it down. Traditions, once lost, is gone forever. And that's something we must not forget in this growing society of ours.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thanks, Ron. I think that's a very important reminder for us all, especially when we all get caught up in the rat race sometimes. So it's really important to sometimes just take a step back and, reassess and really think about what matters to us. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We've come to the end of our show. Make your vote count. Vote for the Workers' Party. Thank you.